I'm going to summarize cognitive models for you so you don't forget.
That'd be great.
Okay, so number one, they're embodied.
Nope, don't say that.
They have you have implicit understanding
Thank you.
with a cognitive model.
Right. Okay.
They provide basic level categorization
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity for more abstract understanding later.
Okay.
Number three,
Hello, welcome back to episode 5 of Lessons Learned. This is our semi-new set. Evan
yeah,
has rearranged his room a little bit.
that's yeah.
Uh, yeah, so we're done addressing that. um,
Yep.
Welcome back. Thank you for being with us until this is the second month, technically. This is the 5th week, so that'd be the second month.
hmm
Yeah, so we are starting a new kind of content from the book, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, all right. Do you
Yeah,
want to just go ahead and take off with that?
sure. This is going to be interesting. The first spot that we're going through is kind of intro.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's actually the introduction to the myth section.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be setting the groundwork pretty much for how he's looking at myth,
Gotcha.
the way
Okay.
he's looking at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I'm ready if you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as ready as I can be while you throw Jordan Peterson
Right.
vocabulary and
I
sentences at me.
I do think this stuff's easier.
Okay.
So we'll see if that actually turns out like it should. But all right, here we go. We're on page 91.
Page what?
91.
91. Okay.
Yeah, just for reference. It is reasonable to presume that, over the long run, our species forgets most things that are useless.
Mm-hmm.
We do not forget our myths, however. Indeed, much of the activity broadly deemed cultural is in fact the effort to ensure that such myths are constantly represented and communicated.
Um, I'm actually happy. I understood all of it, but I'm still gonna let you break it down
Okay,
because either I've gotten smarter or the text has gotten a little easier.
it's easier here. It's
Okay.
easier here for sure.
I'm no smarter than I was before.
It won't necessarily stay easier,
Okay.
I think, but basically what he's saying is that he sees myths as like cultural stories um, that are constantly represented and communicated.
Yeah.
So I think he's seeing myths more broadly than just actual, like Greek mythology or Norse mythology or anything like
Right.
that. He's he's seeing it as not only these things that we're always representing um, and interacting with each other in stories that we tell and stuff, but he assumes that we forget everything that's not useless, which is an
Yeah.
important presupposition that he's making because then everything that he focuses on as a myth, he's going to assume that it's highly important for some reason.
Hmm.
So keep that in mind.
Well, it's really interesting because he opens with that we inherently forget things that are useless, right?
Yeah.
That is, it's key that he opens with that because then he follows it with that we never forget our myths.
hmm
Um, and I know today Jordan Peterson, where I mean, I still don't even have a pin on where he sits in regards to faith.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting that even at this time of the writing of the book, he kind of makes a point to kind of say that there's a little bit beyond there's something more to these myths um, than just like useless information or
hmm
useless stories. And I mean, removing ourselves from Christianity, let's look at something like Norse myths,
hmm
which is something you and I are rather fond of. We like the Norse stories. That was like their moral system. They had
Right.
honor, they had a way to fight, they had a reason to fight. I mean,
hmm
we were watching that show Vikings, and I've read parts of I want to sit down and actually read it, but Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book,
Right.
which is a fantastic book if you have not read it. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, great book. But he talks about all of Norse mythology, and there's codes and there's rules and stuff. And for those that don't understand, the idea is that there isn't a heaven, there is a Valhalla, and you only get to Valhalla if you die at war, if you die in combat.
Hmm.
So that's a moral for them. They have to. That's like a whole code, is that they actually do have to try their very hardest in battle and die while
Right.
trying their hardest.
Yeah.
That is how they have to live. So I know that's probably a little bit removed from the point he's getting at, but I think
Mm.
just trying to remove ourselves from just the Christian perspective and look at how myths have affected culture and society
Yeah.
and stuff heavily. Heavily. It
Hmm.
is, I don't think, ever are myths, at least in this sense, referencing religion and beliefs,
Hmm.
have they ever been anything less than important? And even the people like today that oppose Christianity, they're opposing it so harshly because it's an important thing in society. Does it make sense?
Sure. I think I see what you mean.
Yeah. So, because if it was useless, if they really truly thought it was useless, then they'd just be like,
It'd be ignored.
yeah, they'd be like, whatever,
Or
I
it'd
don't
be the
care.
same way that we talk about things like Greek mythology now.
But it's not.
Hmm.
And it's been around for, Christianity's been around for,
3,000 years,
yeah,
probably, with the Old Testament.
and on top of the Judeo-Christian
Hmm.
value system in our society still to this day.
Yeah.
So it had,
I
there's
think that's
some,
part of his point.
yeah, there's some gravity there, and an important gravity.
Yeah. So that's a good starting point. Some of these are just going to be claims that he makes.
Hmm.
So that's what this one is. It's pretty short, but it's a claim that's important to understand for the context of the book. In this section, he's talking quite a bit about Carl Jung
Yeah.
and his idea of the collective unconscious. So that's something we'll get into in a little bit, but it's important to understand Jung for just because he's a big influence on Jordan Peterson
Yeah.
and a
Okay.
lot of his thinking here. So, and you'll see how that is with these quotes. So, this one, Jung believed that religious or mythological symbols sprung from a universal source whose final point of origin was biological and heritable.
Hmm.
So, he thought that all of these symbols that we see, like the cross, Jesus Christ, all of these things, he thought they were inherently biological.
Interesting.
And he doesn't go into much depth on what that actually looks like,
Yeah.
but I think it's something to keep in mind. And so now I can talk about the collective unconscious, if you
Yeah.
understand that quote.
Oh, I understand that quote. I just think it's a very dangerous presupposition to be making.
Well, I think, and he talks about how a lot of people with the collective unconscious, they don't understand what it means
Hmm.
because Jung's books are really confusing and hard to read.
Yeah.
So he does a good job describing it. I didn't go through and pick any quotes from him explaining it, like all of the nuances, I guess, of it,
Sure.
but I do have a definition of it
Hmm.
that he wrote down. So I'll give you the
Yeah.
definition of
Go
collective
for it.
unconscious. The collective unconscious that constitutes the basis for shared religious mythology is, in fact, the behavior, the procedures. Oh, he doesn't have any in there. The behavior, the procedures that have been generated, transmitted, imitated, and modified by everyone who has ever lived everywhere.
Hmm.
So when Jung describes the collective unconscious, he's pretty much saying that it's a collective memory that's passed on
Right.
in between generations.
Hmm.
And people are like, no, that's stupid. You can't pass on memories.
Right.
Um,
Which is my initial thought right now, but I'm curious. I
right.
think these men are seldom to make an accusation like that without.
No, yeah. So basically what he's saying is, and this is the part that Jordan takes a long time to explain, is that it's pretty much in the behaviors that we pass down this collective memory
Okay. That makes more
because
sense.
it would be like one generation of people sees all the behaviors that their parents do
Hmm.
and they inherit those behaviors
Yeah.
and the stories and stuff that they tell and then they have kids and they spread that to the next generation.
Well, it's kind of like what I was talking, or what we were both talking
Hmm.
about last episode about community.
Dude, I found a quote for you
Oh,
that talks about adults and children.
oh, That's okay. Is that are we
So
getting that to that a little later?
I was just gonna give it to you right now. It's not
Okay.
one that we can talk about too much,
Okay, sure.
in my opinion, but
Then yeah, then just lay it on me.
adults embody the behavioral wisdom of their culture for their children,
Yes.
which is just what we've been talking about.
Right. And I think it's interesting because what they're saying at face value is a very like obscure and arguably easily destroyed concept that we can pass down memories.
Hmm.
But at its core, as they've explained it, they're not wrong at all, like not even a little bit. But it's exactly what we're talking about, where like our experiences will be reflected in our children.
Hmm.
So like people that I have nothing against people with tattoos.
Yeah.
Let me put that out there. I want to get a tattoo. Numerous. You want to get a tattoo. But for sake of examples, if you grew up and maybe there was a bully in your life, or maybe you saw something bad happen, maybe even consistently from people with tattoos, you would pass that memory down to your kids in the sense of like anybody with tattoos you avoid or have hesitancy towards, your
Hmm.
kids are going to pick up on that, and then that becomes a continuous memory that's passed down.
Yeah.
And that can be powerful in both a good and a bad sense.
And yeah, so here's the important thing about that relates to the myths
Hmm.
is that what he says in that collective unconscious quote is that it constitutes the basis for shared religious mythology.
Hmm.
So pretty much what he's saying is we have all of these behaviors in common and experiences in common,
Hmm.
which is what allows these religious mythologies to exist because
Interesting.
we can kind of understand the world in similar ways.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, but I'll go through each of those verbs that he uses there.
Sure.
So, generated,
Hmm.
the behavior is generated, so someone does it first. It's transmitted, so they tell someone else how to do it.
Hmm.
It's imitated, so then people start copying that person because it's a successful behavior. And then it's modified by everyone else to make it better and better. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what he's talking about in the first quote when he's saying the things that aren't important or that are useless, those are forgotten. Because
Yeah.
this is the process of transmitting these important behaviors to other people so that they can spread that on.
Hmm. Um.
And then we'll go into it more in some of these other quotes, but what he's going to end up saying is that myths are the way that we pass on these behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, you're if you look at behavior from like a moral standpoint,
Hmm.
like as as Christians, like our behaviors generally strongly reflect our moral and religious beliefs. Most importantly, um, do unto others as you would wish done unto you.
Hmm.
Right. So that is behavior that's reflected from our Christian religious standpoint, and that I mean that can be exemplified throughout almost everything we do
Hmm.
because that's just like our belief system. So it's interesting because and maybe I'm taking it a little bit out of context, but I think it's a good thought anyways. um Society today is trying to diminish that and replace it with self-importance,
Mm.
which goes into like Carl Truman's Rise and Triumph of the
Right.
Modern Self. But I think that's an important point to bring up in this regard because as the memories are passed down, through religious beliefs and
Hmm.
stuff, it's crucial for us because that's how we need to treat each other. That's how we show each other grace and how we show each other forgiveness and stuff. But in a society that's trying to dismantle that, not because it's useless, but because it is important, and they see the importance of that, and it's hard to control people that are um, look to a higher power.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, who else would we fear other than God? You know what I
Right.
mean? Maybe,
Ultimately.
yeah. Ultimately, truly and ultimately,
Hmm.
if we believe that in our death we truly followed God and we truly gave everything to God that we could, there isn't a fear of death because you're going to heaven. You know, um, and again, not for us to judge, but that's what we believe. What is there to fear other than God itself and the punishment that could come from that?
Right.
So, and if you have that kind of society, it's very hard to tell people what to do and what to believe. It's a lot easier if you say this is bad and you destroy it,
Hmm.
and then you start saying you need to believe in yourself and only yourself and find meaning in yourself. Well, it's hard to do that. If you close out everything that you've been taught and everything that, all those memories that were passed on to you, those behaviors are passed to you for a reason. If you shut that out, you're basically saying, I want to fail.
Yeah, so I think this is why Jordan brings up Nietzsche
Hmm.
towards the beginning of the book when he's saying that without God there's no justification for the moral structure
Yeah.
because then there's no quote unquote myth.
Hmm.
There's no stories that are demonstrating these behaviors, but then you're still trying to make the behaviors important, but you have no justification to do so.
Hmm.
So then this whole structure is on super shaky foundations.
Right. It's wild. I We said this last episode. Jordan Peterson's incredibly good at abstracting from what we understand and explaining
Mm-hmm.
like the why to our how and what.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
It's really good.
and it's awesome because it creates conversations like this,
Yeah.
which are like can create like true fundamental understandings of our why, which gives us a better understanding of how to uphold those,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. So next he talks about going into categories or
Hmm.
how we understand the world through categories
Hmm.
because it makes it way easier to understand things if you're not trying to keep everything separate. So this is a quote kind of explaining that. And this is also important for the whole idea of narratives and having some abstract story that can apply to multiple different things.
Hmm.
That's why it's important to have categories. So he says the act of categorization enables us to treat the mysterious and complex world we inhabit as if it were simpler, as if it were in fact comprehensible. We perform this act of simplification by treating objects or situations that share some aspect of structure, function, or implication as if they were identical.
Hmm. Okay.
So, one example, I think I included a quote about it later, but I can bring it up now as it's a way to understand this. Is pretty much like think of a chair.
Yeah.
How would you define it?
Like, how would I define a
Yeah,
chair? um, and maybe I'm ruining your point because we're sitting in obscure chairs. It doesn't have four legs. I guess a chair, in my definition, would be something that supports and is designed for a singular individual to sit on with the ability to lean back in comfort.
sure. Okay. Well, let's see. Oh, did I not save the quote? That's okay. Pretty much what he says is that we like to define things
Mm-hmm.
according to, or we like to think that we define things according to the objective thing that they are.
Mm-hmm.
But what he posits here is that we actually define things in relation to how they impact us.
Yeah, which is exactly what I just did.
Right. That's going to be the
Interesting.
more accurate way of doing it because he points out in the story, like, you could consider a tree stump a chair if you're sitting on it
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't have legs or a back or anything.
Yeah.
And it's because it is, um, it's something you can sit on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know where I was going to go with that,
No, but I think
but
it's like you brought up a good point too that we really define things by their impact on us. I mean, like I can't think of anything that you wouldn't define how it impacts you. I mean, like define a light. It lets me see something that illuminates a
right.
room to allow me to see.
But you don't say it's an LED, you don't say it's a
No,
candle
or like a flame or a filament
or
or
something that's on the ceiling
right.
or the
Um,
sun for that matter.
or like a bed is a comfortable place to lay down.
Hmm.
And while I didn't say comfortable for me or anything, a comfortable place to lay down, those all impact me. Those don't impact bugs. Those don't impact like your blanket. That's
Hmm.
not changing your blanket this because it's
It's
not
still
your
a bed.
bed. It's
Yeah.
right. So I think that it reminds me of something that I was told is a Midwestern thing,
Hmm.
but I find that hard to believe as I've met you and Emma, and I know you guys are true Coloradoans. Um, is that what you're called? Coloradoans? Coloradans?
Probably Colorado.
You say it so weird. Um, but I was told that Midwestern people describe distance by the time.
No, you do that here.
Yeah.
You have to here because when you're going through the mountains,
Uh huh.
distance is stupid.
Yeah.
It's what 256 miles. That means nothing when it's just back and forth through the mountains.
Right.
It's 4 hours.
Yeah. But it's the same thing back in the Midwest, like back where I lived. It's a dirt road, and it goes 50 miles that way, and my friends 30 miles in. Well, how I don't care how far it is. That doesn't mean anything to me. How long is it going to take me to get there? And maybe that's like a younger generation thing,
Mm.
or maybe it's just misinformation.
It could be.
Yeah,
I don't know anyone that.
says like, "Oh, it's 15 miles away." No,
How
how
long does it
long?
take? Yeah,
I don't care how far it is.
yeah,
How long is it going to take me to get there? Because if it's 15 miles in the middle of Cleveland, that's
right.
going to take me like 5 hours.
Yeah.
But if it's 15 miles back home, it's going to take me like 16
Hmm.
minutes, 10, if we're being honest.
Yeah. So who knows? I don't
Yeah,
know.
but it reminds
We
me
at
of that.
least do that. So
Right, it
that's.
reminds me of that because I want to know how long it's taking me to get there because that's what's impacting me. The distance
Mhm.
doesn't impact me, the time impacts me.
I'd argue the distance does impact you, but not knowing it.
What do you mean?
Well, if it's further away, then it takes you longer.
Well, no, because of exactly what you said. If it's 256 miles through curvy roads,
Hmm.
it'll take you 4 hours. If it's 256 miles through straight shot, it'll probably take you an hour and a half. You know
That's
what I
fair.
mean? So distance
Well,
is
no, because it's
irrelevant.
256 miles on the roads.
Yeah.
So it would be less than 256 miles if it was a straight shot.
No, no, no. But I mean, if you took that length of road and
Hmm.
straightened it,
Hmm.
that's what I'm saying.
I think it would take about the same though,
No,
because
what?
I'm going like 70 miles an hour, 75 anyways.
Right. But you're not also doing that with between traffic, between like taking the turns. There's so many turns that say
Uh
55.
huh. But you don't do that.
I do that. I don't want to roll a car.
It's safe to go like 10 over.
It's not.
10 over the yellow. Yeah,
No.
you can do that.
Yeah, I mean in a sedan, every time we get in your Jeep, I like my heart's like I don't skip a beat because I know you're not a bad driver or
Hmm.
anything, but I'm just like, hmm, I don't think I'd go that fast.
Whatever, it's fine.
I'm always looking at your speedometer. I'm like, that's an interesting speed to choose for this turn that's coming up. That turn's coming really fast.
It's never a problem. We've never crashed. All right, Jordan Peterson. Okay, this one's going to be a bit different.
Okay.
We're talking about cognitive models because it's going to matter.
Okay.
So I'll read this first thing. He doesn't really define it, but it has a cognitive model has 6 properties, and
Mhm.
we're going to just kind of crash course through each of those
Okay.
so you can understand what a cognitive model is.
Okay.
So let's see. He's saying if you don't have the ability to like see things objectively,
Mhm.
then people naturally incline towards the development of what has been described as a cognitive model. So a cognitive model is something that people will use if they aren't able to think about things objectively, like an objective world that just exists on its own.
So, okay. Does that mean because you and me think about most things objectively, or at least we take objectified views into consideration.
Well, I don't think that's possible because we're subjective. It's like seeing
I'm
the
closer to understanding what you're saying.
it's like seeing a tree
Yeah.
and it's just a tree. That's objective.
Oh,
But
because we're
but
humans and we see how things relate to us.
so well what he talks about, yeah, basically, is that we
Okay.
see how Jordan Peterson would say it is they would see the world as it as what it signifies, aka as a place of moral action where everything impacts us morally speaking because they didn't have that objective world. Okay?
We can't be objective because we're people. Like we're humans. Like
I
truly.
think that's part of his argument is that we
Okay.
can't escape that subjectivity
Yes.
because we're always looking for meaning.
Hmm.
But we can still say that tree is just a tree.
Right.
Someone like maybe back in the Middle Ages would have said it represents something.
Yeah.
It represents life. It impacts me in some moral way.
Sure.
Okay, so that's kind of a cognitive model.
Okay.
And it's not very clear here, which is why I'm going through these 6 properties.
Gotcha.
Because that'll
Okay.
help it make a lot more sense.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So, number one is cognitive models are embodied with regard to their content, which essentially means that they can be used without necessarily being defined, or they're implicit in action without necessarily being explicit in description. And he provides an example for that because that's pretty confusing.
Yeah.
So, if you're asked what makes a dog, okay, what I would say, I would agree with what he says. You might say, I can't say, but I know when one is around.
Yeah.
You couldn't just define a dog, especially in a way that could differentiate it from a wolf or a hyena or a cat. It'd be
Yeah.
really hard to do that. But you know a dog when you see it.
Yeah.
So that's what it means when it's embodied. It's some implicit understanding.
Okay. Okay. Implicit understanding. That's what stands out to me. That's what
Yeah.
my brain is understood.
Okay, so that's number one.
Okay.
Cognitive models are embodied.
Of six, yes.
Yeah. Number two, they're. Okay, this one's fun. They're characterized by basic level categorization and basic level primacy. These terms mean, respectively, so this is basic level categorization, that the phenomena most naturally apprehensible to the human mind, perceptible as a whole or gestalt, nameable, communicable, manipulatable, memorable, serve as material for the initial categorization, and that those initial. Oh, the camera turned off.
Welcome back from technical difficulties. I was in the middle of a crisis while Evan read part two of what is
A
cognitive
cognitive model.
cognitive model. I don't even remember the title of the thing we're talking about. We're already on part two.
Yeah, what's number one?
Implicit understanding.
Sure. It's embodied, but yeah, that's the same thing.
No, you said implicit understanding was okay.
Oh yeah, but he's calling it being embodied.
I don't care what he calls it.
Okay, well, okay, so this one is two things. So basic level categorization,
Mm-hmm.
which is phenomena that most naturally apprehensible to the human mind, serve as material for initial categorization, and then basic level primacy, which I think is easier to understand,
Mm-hmm.
that those initial categories provide the basis for the development of more abstract concepts. So basically, these cognitive models. So they let's see. They serve as material for initial categorization. So they let you categorize things really quickly. So you could see
Okay.
a new type of dog and say that's a dog.
Yeah.
You don't know any specifics about it, but it's a dog.
So, wait, my implicit understanding allows me to do part two.
Which is basic level categorization.
Okay. You should have just started with that.
Oh my gosh. I'm just reading his quotes, okay? And then after basic level categorization comes basic level primacy. And primacy just means that your initial categories provide the basis for you to develop more abstract concepts.
Is that part three?
No, that's two. Both of
Oh,
those are part two.
yikes.
So does that
Okay.
make sense?
So there's implicit understanding, and then there
Which
is,
allows for categorization
and then categorization allows for basic categorization, and then
and primacy, basic level primacy.
what's basic level primacy?
hmm Which pretty much means that your initial category that you have
Uh-huh.
of understanding, it's super simple and stuff, but it's going to allow you to develop a more abstract concept.
We're gonna pretend I completely understand that,
Okay,
and we're gonna go on to the next thing, and hopefully I'll understand it. This is how I treat most of my classwork when I do it.
fair enough. Question three. It's not a question,
Part three.
but part three.
Question. It's a question for me.
Yeah, so this one, the words are tough, so we'll just go for the meaning.
Wait.
They may be used in metonymic or reference point reasoning. So, metonymic reasoning is symbolic. Metonymic means interchangeable and more. Um, all you need to know about this one is that the fact that objects in a cognitive model have metonymic properties means that any or all of them can stand for any or all of the others. Pretty much, he's talking about metaphors
Why don't? Why doesn't he just say that?
because he has to provide all the context so that you can say, instead of just saying, yeah, we're good at metaphors,
But we
it's
are.
he's being extremely precise. Not only are we good at metaphors, any object can stand in for any or all others, metaphorically speaking,
Oh yeah, of
which is how
course.
like a narrative works.
Yeah.
Because you're taking something specific and it's an abstract that can represent a bunch of other things.
Is that kind of like animated movies where
What do
like
you mean?
humans are replaced with like animals?
No, that's just anthropomorphism.
Well, I mean like it like yes, I completely understand and agree with you. And we're gonna go on to part
4.
4.
Halfway there. This one's pretty simple, I think. And it's related to categories.
I hope so.
So, cognitive models are characterized by membership and centrality gradients, which sounds really difficult. But basically all it means is that a thing can be a better or worse exemplar of its category. For
Okay.
example, you could say like a robin is more of a bird than an ostrich.
Yes,
That's it.
but man, I'm having a hard time tying that back into what you just said. Like, yes, I
Uh,
understand that. Totally makes sense.
it's that things can be a better or worse example of a category, but it still belongs in that category.
Oh, okay, yes, yes, yes. Is that what you said?
I explained it a little bit more this time. I was just quoting him.
Okay.
But that's what it means by membership. So it has membership in a category,
Mm-hmm.
it puts things in a membership with a category.
Okay.
And the centrality gradients, he doesn't technically define that, but I imagine that all that means is if you take a robin, that would be much more central, like
Mm-hmm.
a central example of a bird, and
Yeah.
an ostrich would be like way out on like the fringes of what it means to be a bird.
Yeah.
I assume that's just what you mean by centrality gradients.
Yeah, oh yeah, that I
So,
would agree with that. On the one of the few things I understood so far, yes.
okay, so that's number 4. Number 5. They contain phenomena associated as a consequence of familial resemblance. So, pretty much, that just means that things share similarities with a potentially hypothetical object, which I didn't understand too much, but he has a good example here. So, if you have a family with a bunch of brothers
Mm-hmm.
and their dad
Mm-hmm.
looks different than, I mean, they all look different, right? Because they're a family, but they look similar.
Right.
So, just his example there is none of their brothers precisely resembles another, but if you saw them in a group, you would say those men are all related.
Yeah.
That's it. You know? Okay. Next one.
Next one.
Number 6.
Yep.
This one's the coolest one.
We're at 6.
This one's the coolest one.
It's cool.
I like it.
Okay.
So, cognitive models give rise to the phenomenon of polysemy or polysemy. I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to go with polysemy, which he says is a defining characteristic of myth. So, a polysemic story is written and can be read validly on many levels.
I think I understand, but
Here's an example that'll for sure make you understand,
yeah.
and it's in the book, so all I have to do is quote it.
Yay.
The struggle of Moses against the Egyptian pharaoh, for example, to take a story we will consider later, can also be read as an allegory of the struggle of the oppressed against the oppressor, or even more generally, as the rebellion of the world destroying savior against society. So
Okay.
it's just, abstraction and metaphors,
Yeah.
basically. You can take the same story and get multiple levels of meaning out of it.
Right. Okay.
So that's a cognitive model. So to recap for
I
anyone listening,
understand how you feel when I talk about like car engines or like motorcycle engines, when I'm just like, yeah, so like then the crankshaft spins the camshafts and that's what opens up the valves so the pistons are
yeah,
firing and
yeah, yeah.
exhausting at the right time. And that's just how engines work. And you're just like, stop talking. I understand that struggle now. I understand your feelings.
Yeah?
Yes,
Well, I'm going to summarize cognitive models for you so you don't forget.
that'd be great.
Okay, so number one, they're embodied.
Nope, don't say that.
They have you have implicit understanding
Thank you.
with a cognitive model.
Right. Okay.
They provide basic level categorization
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity for more abstract understanding later.
Okay.
Number three, um, they can be metaphorical. So they don't just have to be literal, they can represent other things than what they actually literally are.
Right.
Number four, part of the categories that you use is that things can be a better or worse exemplar of this category.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to all be the same thing to be in the same category.
Right.
Similarly, with number five, uh, they have familial resemblance.
Mm-hmm.
So they have some sort of similarity with a potential object,
Which allows you to categorize them if they were together, but
even if they're not exactly the same.
exactly, yes.
And then number six, a polysemic story is written and can be read on validly on many levels.
Yes.
So they can be literal and multiple different levels of metaphor or
Metaphorical,
abstraction.
yeah, yep, that's exactly what I was going to
So
say.
that's a cognitive model.
Okay.
That's important for the rest of the book because this is pretty much where he's coming from to understand myths. So he's seeing them as these stories that help us categorize different things, that provide basic level abstraction, that provide opportunities for higher abstraction, and that represent multiple things at the same time.
Like, I understood what you said. Like, I'm not, like, totally dumbfounded and lost.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just like, how much of this cognitive model, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. How much of this cognitive model do I actually need to, like, conscientiously think about through the reading of this book?
I don't think you need. I think it'll stick with you well enough
Okay.
just to understand that this is how he's seeing myths.
Okay. I definitely have some questions, but I'm sure they're going to be answered.
Well, you can hit me with them now.
Well, it's just more like how using the word with my understanding of the word myth in regards to this book referring to more specifically like Christianity
Mm-hmm.
and more modern,
Yeah.
like modern religions that have it like stuck to this day. How is he seeing basic level categorization from the Bible?
So I think the basic level would be probably the most literal sense
Hmm.
of the Bible. Um,
Like the categorization of the books?
so like no, it would be like Jesus Christ actually being just Jesus Christ, like being someone that was on the earth,
Okay,
and he's like a person that's walking and talking and doing things.
right,
That's that basic level. But then you can abstract that and say he's also someone that represents the greatest tragedy that could ever exist.
right.
And he represents this thing that brings the logos into the world for our understanding.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit more confident about like where this is gonna go.
It'll be
So,
really interesting what he gets out of the different myths moving forward.
yeah, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really
I don't
curious.
know all of them that we're going to go through, but I know it's going to start with something called the Enuma Elish, which is a Sumerian myth.
Hmm.
I don't think it's their creation myth, but it's involved kind of with creation. I think it's a little bit after their creation. But it's about Marduk and him being this god that ends up fighting Tiamat, who's a female dragon that like represents chaos and destruction.
Is this in the Bible?
No,
Okay.
this is Sumerian, which is like pre-Bible.
Oh, I'm. I feel like I'm just so. Continue. I'm lost in my own thoughts. Just,
No, it's a lot.
just keep.
And
paving the road.
that's why I thought this section would be pretty dense, is because he's really laying the groundwork for understanding these myths.
I was hoping that the groundwork was behind us.
I think that's the densest stuff. I think there might be a little bit more groundwork, but that's like big
Sure.
things.
And you know, we started this episode so strong,
What do
and
you
I
mean?
was so like, you were talking, and I was like, yeah, I understand this. Like,
I
I.
told you I thought it got harder.
No! Oh man, I was like, I thought I was gonna have a redeeming moment. Like last episode, I was just like, explain everything to me.
Hmm.
And then we started, and I was like, no, I'm good. I'm a big boy now. And then you started talking about cognitive model, and I was like, is this what it's like to feel stupid?
No, this was a tough section.
Yeah,
These cognitive models were rough,
that was,
but they're super cool. So,
yeah,
going off of cognitive models, I found the quote for the chair thing that we
yes,
talked about
yes,
earlier.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
here's that. And now you can understand the chair thing kind of in context of the cognitive models.
Okay.
So he says, "We presume without thinking that we group things as a consequence of something about them rather than as a consequence of something about us."
Hmm.
But so he's arguing that we do actually
Yeah,
categorize things according to how they affect us. Um, and then his example of the chair. Is a tree stump a chair? Yes, if you can sit on it. It isn't really something about an object considered as an independent thing that makes it a chair. It is rather something about its potential for interaction with us. The category chair contains objects that serve a function we value.
yeah. And I mean, my only like really kind of like my first critique.
Okay, sure.
Um, I wouldn't say like I wouldn't look at a tree stump and go, that's a chair. I'd say that's a place to sit,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't say it's a chair because it lacks the things that
Yeah,
I have already described. And maybe that's just a me thing, but I seldomly know people, I don't know anybody personally, that looks at a tree stump and goes, ah, a chair. So
hmm,
much as they go, oh, I can sit there.
right.
So
And that,
like it doesn't diminish his point.
no, and I think I agree with you. This might be where he brings in the centrality gradients
Hmm.
and say that's just a worse exemplar of a chair,
Yeah,
but it
it's an
still is a chair.
extreme outlier of the graph.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's probably what he would say. But I think I agree with you. I don't find it to be the most convincing example,
yeah.
but I think it gets his point across. I think it is true,
Hmm.
at least to a certain extent,
Yeah.
that we do value thing or we do group things
If
based on
he
how we value
if
them.
he had just said like a seat, he would have sold me
Sure.
because like define a seat,
Hmm.
a place to sit. Because a seat could be a stool, it could be a chair, it could be like a car seat, or it could just be a tree stump. I
Right.
think that's where if he
Mm.
had said like
Chair might have just a more specific
yeah,
connotation.
and
Yeah.
maybe it's just because that's how we see it, or maybe that's just from the times in which he was writing that. It was a lot easy, like there wasn't so many linguistical differences
Yeah.
as that we have today.
Hmm.
So,
Maybe.
but his point still stands.
I think he makes a good point. Yeah. Not the most convincing example.
Yeah,
So for this next quote, do you want me to read it or do you want to skip it? It's kind of talking about the same thing we were just talking about classifying things. I just thought it was a good quote.
go for it.
Okay. We classify things according to the way they appear, the way they act, and in accordance with their significance to us, which is an indication of how to act in their presence.
Mm. Hmm.
I think maybe that actually that last part of that does add something,
Yeah,
which is it tells us how to act. I think that's something that's pretty key.
yeah.
What do you think?
Well, do you think we need to break that down at all?
No, I don't think we need to break it down.
Okay. Um, I guess it's. I think of like a more funny example.
Sure.
That's not really funny because it's real, but
Okay.
um, think about the like the airplanes that fly over the like Amazon jungles and stuff,
Hmm.
and they fly past like tribes
Yeah.
that have no idea what a plane is,
Yeah.
so they attack it.
Hmm.
So like they have no idea how to act or react to that mode of transportation.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And like I'm gonna tie that back to like us in the sense that like our modern day technology, and I refer to that includes like cars and homes and stuff,
Sure.
is like because we were like we just grew up with it, for lack of a
Hmm.
better term.
Hmm.
We just grew up with it. It was very implemented into our lives. It was streamlined into our lives, so we always know how to interact with things. Um, versus if we were to go back in time, I'm sure they'd have things that we would be like, "What is this?" Or even like now, analog clocks. Younger kids,
Hmm.
they're not teaching them how to read analog clocks. I don't remember when they stopped. I think your brother's grade or the year younger than him.
Okay.
So 3 years, I think, is when they stopped teaching that.
Mm. So the class of 2022.
Yeah, I think it was class of 21 or 22, and I'm sure it varies, and I'm sure there's
Yeah.
other places
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
still do teach it, but it's generally speaking been removed from the curriculum. So I have no idea how to.
Read
They can't
analog.
tell you. They
Hmm.
have not a single clue,
Yeah.
and I think it's just interesting because it's like it clearly demonstrates like the removal of the importance of an object as times progress,
Mm.
or arguably as times regress. Because if we were to go like, if there was a huge solar flare and it knocked out all technology and stuff, count 20, 30 years, nobody's going to know how to use like a phone
Hmm.
because like there's no electricity, there's no technology being used. So how are you supposed to understand it?
Hmm.
Which I'm sure I'm not necessarily adding anything to what's being said so much as I'm just,
Well, I think the something to take away from what you're talking about is people wouldn't know how to act in the presence of a phone.
yeah,
You know, I think that that's why those Amazon tribes that would
yeah,
attack a plane would attack it is because it's something big and loud and they haven't seen it before,
yeah.
which means probably dangerous.
Yeah, I guess my ultimate point is that sometimes it's I can't think of the word, but like not refreshing, but kind of like eye opening. It's
Hmm.
sometimes eye opening to think about situations like that, both in the fact that an individual could see a plane as nothing more than like useless, almost scary thing.
Sure.
At the same time, being an individual that has no concept of a plane and then trying to grasp the idea of like seeing a plane for the first time, and like as somebody who's like flown on a handful of planes at this point, especially
Hmm.
from college and stuff, they're loud and they smell awful, and just like both on both ends of the spectrum, not known what a plane is like they're spooky, but on the other hand, meeting an individual who has no concept of it,
Hmm.
I just think it's a really eye-opening way of like viewing the reality of the world in which we live in, and the widespread demographic of people that inhabit this planet.
Yeah. And I think that something he talks about in here is the idea that we live in a largely different world
Mm-hmm.
from the people that were creating those myths. So they had to learn how to act in the presence of unknown things or even known things in a very different way that we did,
Yeah,
which I think is very important for how he's going to interpret stuff later.
gotcha. Okay.
So, next one.
Yeah.
So, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about how he sees myths and kind of how they're structured, what they're made up of.
Mm-hmm.
So, the partially implicit mythic stories or fantasies that guide our adaptation in general appear to describe or portray or embody three permanent constituent elements of human experience. So, what he's saying is mythic stories um, describe or embody three elements of human experience,
Mm-hmm.
which is the unknown or unexplored territory,
Right.
the known or explored territory, and the process or the knower that mediates between them.
Interesting. Okay.
So he thinks that at a fundamental level, all myths will have some sort of representation of the known, the unknown, and the knower. So,
You're staring at me.
I just think it's cool.
I think my brain crashed. Um, it crashed in a plane that I didn't know how to pilot. um, yeah, I mean, it's so. Hmm. I have no comment, at least at this second. So if something's
Okay.
on your mind, go ahead and take over.
No, I don't know if there is too much to talk about that. I mostly included that just because I think it's an important thing to understand.
hmm
Is that he's going to focus on the known, the unknown, and the knower
Okay.
for a lot of these myths, especially the creation myths. That's something
Oh.
he's going to bring up.
Okay.
And I know he talks about later. I don't think I included any quotes about it, but like he talks about how in a lot of these stories, for example, everything started in some sort of chaos,
Yeah.
which was the unknown.
Yeah.
So that's just a really basic thing that's very similar between a lot of them.
When we talked a while ago in episode 2 that God operates in chaos,
Mm-hmm.
which is like wild,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
uh,
And so I'm going to paraphrase this paragraph here because I
hmm
think it talks about pretty much why he thinks that this is important or why it's necessary that people have these mythic stories
hmm
and maybe even why they carry on. So I'll read the first little bit and then I can paraphrase. No matter where an individual lives and no matter when, he faces the same set of problems or perhaps the same set of meta problems since the details differ endlessly. So he's cultural, so he has to come to existence with culture. Um, he must master the domain of the known, so he has to be able to have skills and survive in the known world, which is hard enough. Which means he has to understand his role within his culture. Um, he must also be able to tolerate and benefit from the unknown, um, or the unexplored territory. And finally, he must be able to adapt to the presence of himself, which is also he sees it as the exploratory process or the limited mortal subject, which must serve as a mediator between the creative and destructive underworld of the unknown and the secure, oppressive, patriarchal system of human culture. So, pretty much, he's saying that everybody has to be able to, at a fundamental level, survive in the known world,
uh,
and survive in this culture and society that we're in, survive in the unknown, and try to get something out of that, or at least not perish because of the unknown.
hmm
Um, and lastly, which I think is the hardest part, be able to understand the process of living in both of those at the same time, the known and the unknown, or the
right?
chaos and the order,
Yeah.
which is what his other two books are about. One of them is uh, it's 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos.
hmm
So how to not let chaos take over. And then the next one is 12 more rules beyond order.
Mm.
So his whole thing is about he thinks that the optimal way to live life is a balance where you have one foot in order so that you feel protected and secure,
hmm
and the other foot in chaos so that you're growing and exploring and learning new things.
Interesting.
So he thinks that's the fundamental story that it's the fundamental experience that we all share as humans.
I think, and maybe he pointed this out. Maybe this is exactly what you just said, and it went over my head. But like, that's exactly what we're supposed to do as Christians.
Yeah.
You know, like that's exactly what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is you can't always be holding on to control in your life. You need to be letting go and letting God
Yeah.
guide you and direct you. But at the same time, you can't just totally let go of life and be like, God will fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, wow, okay. That's really I didn't know that. I didn't catch that. I'm glad you pointed that out. But
Yeah. So I think that's a super important quote or paragraph. It wasn't a quote,
yeah.
but I think that ties together the known and unknown
Mhm.
that we've been talking about for this whole book,
Mhm.
that 90 or 100 pages at this point that we've been going through this.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's a really good basis for his justification for the existence of myths,
Gotcha.
because then you can put these stories in with behaviors that can tell people what's important in balancing between order and chaos.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, that's a good one. Let's see. This one's shorter,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you'll like it.
Okay.
We cannot see the unknown because we're protected from it by everything familiar and unquestioned.
Mm. I think that's. Do you want to? Does that need to be explained?
I can kind of go through it.
Yeah. Break it down a bit,
Sure.
just a little.
So, obviously, the first part, we can't see the unknown
Mm-hmm.
because we're protected from it by everything familiar and unquestioned. So, we can't see what's unknown because everything we're seeing is known,
Yeah.
basically. So, like, it's an interesting paradox, I suppose, or dichotomy. I don't know which one would be more accurate. Probably paradox.
It's paradox.
But you can't see the unknown, but you always know it's there,
Mm-hmm.
which is super important.
It kind of sounds like edgy.
Sounds like what?
Edgy.
Oh, edgy?
Yeah, it sounds edgy.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, there are some edgy ones in here that I thought about including.
Like, I mean, just like read it from like 2000s punk rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the black hair.
No, dude,
You
I
can't. You can see the unknown, but it's still like it's unknown, man.
I made this one. It was supposed to be ironic, but I made this one post on Instagram back in high school, and I was on my way back from a field trip thing
Mm-hmm.
with my friend Parker, and we both had on our. We were at an academic team tournament, so we had on slacks and black button-up shirts, and I had mine rolled up, and I had some aviators,
Mm-hmm.
and we just sat on the seats of the bus, like on the top of the seat backs,
Mm-hmm.
and we just took a picture. Like I had the shades on. It was dark outside, so there was no light coming through the windows, and the flash was on, and it looked really kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And then I posted it. My quote was all lowercase, and I said, "We are the children of the bad revolution," and it was iconic, and I'm still proud of it.
You are the bad revolution in your heart. That's what. Oh man.
So I'd say yeah, some of these quotes are on that level.
Yeah, just a funny kind of observation.
Yeah.
Edgy, dad.
So
Um,
yeah, anything else from that one?
no, I mean, I think it like paradox is pretty accurate description.
Hmm.
I think it's more of it's a difficult thing to wrap your brain around truly.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the best way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the best way to kind of look at it is like if you were to like the unknown being, you know, the unknown, like the thing
Yeah.
you haven't done. Um, I simplifying it down to like you're meeting a new person, or even better yet, you have the potential to meet a new person.
Hmm.
So you see somebody in your class at like the chow hall or whatever, and you recall, oh, they made a really good point.
Sorry, did you say Chow Hall?
Yeah,
What is that?
like the cafe, like the cafeteria.
It's just cafeteria. No one says Chow Hall. So,
uh, okay.
anyways, continue.
I don't I don't know if I'll ever be able to financially recover from this. Um, in the cafeteria.
Wait, did you like? Is that something you say in Michigan?
No,
Do people just say Chow Hall?
no,
Why'd you say it then?
cause
Oh, okay.
cause Blake's in the Marines
Uh huh.
and they call it the Chow Hall.
Okay.
So he said Chow Hall a bunch to me.
So your friend said Chow Hall.
Yeah.
So now you say Chow Hall.
When do I go to the cafeteria? They call it the caf
You
here.
had 12 years of school, and that wasn't called the Chow Hall. Wouldn't those 12 years override
It was
the?
just called the lunchroom.
Then I'd expect you to say
Evan,
lunchroom.
I'm sorry that I
I would no. Look,
offended you.
look. I'm not offended. I've never heard Chow Hall. I thought that was
Well, you
like
can't say that anymore. You've entered the unknown and
interesting.
made it the known.
It is known.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to the next quote.
No, because I didn't even make my point yet.
All right, make your point.
You got distracted by Chow Hall. That's on you. So,
You used it. Whatever.
somebody in your class
Yep.
makes a really good point, and
Okay.
you see them later in the day in the cafeteria, and
Better.
and in that moment you go, oh, like I would like to get to know this person, and that is on you right there to enter that unknown. So you're aware of it, you can see the
Hmm.
unknown, but it is still the unknown because you haven't done it yet.
Well, dude, let me follow up with a perfect quote for that.
Yes, see,
The unknown is intrinsically interesting in a manner that poses an endless dilemma. It promises and threatens simultaneously.
endless dilemma is the description of the century.
It's good, isn't it?
That is, wow, yeah. Oh man, okay.
And it's true. It's
I'm back in the hot tub of knowledge. I
yeah,
I just used straight filler words for like 5 seconds
that's fine.
for no reason. I could have just sat here in silence.
That's true.
Oh man.
So yeah, I like that one.
I think it's I think it's great at exemplifying what I feel a lot of people go through.
Hmm.
You know,
And that's let's go ahead.
exactly what I described. You're in the cafeteria,
Right. Hmm.
and you see that individual, and like it's not inherently a bad thing to go talk to them. Like there's nothing wrong with talking about somebody, especially if you're like, hey, like you made a really good point in class. Like, do you mind if I join you for lunch and we can kind of chat a little bit more?
Hmm.
Like what a I think that's a great way to like meet people,
Yeah,
you know.
and I think this is really important in today's world because this is the issue with being risk averse,
Hmm.
is that just because something can be threatening, people don't do it, even if it's removing all chance of promise.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty detrimental to how a lot of people live today. Especially when it's so easy to, sit at home, stay on your phone,
Hmm.
don't do anything except watch TikTok.
It's so sad. I think this podcast is the ultimate example of like do what you want to do,
Mm.
because I've been wanting to be on YouTube and be a YouTuber for an embarrassingly long time.
Hmm.
And I've always been so hesitant because I was like, I don't want to do it alone, or like I don't want to do it and fail, 100 reasons to Sunday. But I mean, at the same time, you came to me and you said that you were down to do a podcast because you felt like that's what you needed to do. You need to enter that kind of unknown to push
Hmm.
yourself beyond what you were already capable of.
Get better at speaking. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I think this is the perfect example of get off your butt and go do something that makes you uncomfortable.
yeah.
I think this, like, not that we're both inherently uncomfortable right now.
At least at first it was.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I
It
mean, there's always the option of ridicule online and stuff like that. And
I will take a negative comment right now. We have no comments.
you heard him, everyone.
I will take a negative comment. Go ahead.
Fill him up.
Um, we are almost out of time, and the camera battery is low.
Oh, shoot, dude. There's
How
more
many do you have
quotes.
left?
Well, let's see. I can pick a good one.
Okay.
Shoot, now there's so much pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. That one's not very good. I have like four more quotes.
I would sing like the Jeopardy kind of waiting song, but like I'm scared to get copyright claimed. I'm not saying like I'm an amazing singer or anything, but like I'm not like my pitch isn't bad. Like I
Uh-huh.
would be in tune enough that we might get a copyright claim is my fear.
Then just switch the key. What are you talking about?
Or I could just sing it bad like the recorders. Do
Oh,
do do.
let's see.
I just started my beautiful song. He's
Oh, this is the good one. I
okay.
almost forgot about this. This is at the very end of the introduction, right before we go into the Enuma Elish. I don't know if I said that right earlier, but I can see it now, so now it's right.
Okay.
Okay. We find ourselves vulnerable, mortal creatures thrown into a universe bent on our creation and protection, and our transformation and destruction. Our attitude toward this ambivalent universe can only take one of two forms, positive or negative. The precise nature of these two forms, which can be regarded as personalities, and of the background against which they work, constitutes the central subject matter of myth. And, dare it be said, the proper subject matter of the humanities and fine arts. So, what he's saying is, I think this is hugely important for why myths are important,
I'd say that's a really good quote.
I know, isn't it cool?
But yeah, like go ahead, go on, go on.
Okay, so we find we're vulnerable and we're mortal and we're in this universe that is here to create and protect, but it's also here to transform and destroy.
Hmm.
Um, we can either choose to look at that in a positive way or a negative way. Um, and this positive and negative form, or maybe I think it's saying the the creative and destructive forms of the world and the background against which they work constitute the central subject matter of myth. And that last part he adds in parentheses about humanities and fine arts and stories. That's what's in our stories. So let's look at Lord of the Rings as a good example. You've got the good, the creative, that's
Hmm.
people like Gandalf and Frodo.
Right?
And then you've got the destructive, which is obviously Sauron.
Yeah.
That's a classic, really easy example of that.
Hmm.
And then actually, I'll take Frodo out of it. I would call maybe Gandalf and the elves that creative and protective force.
Hmm.
I'd say Sauron and his army in Mordor are the destructive force,
Hmm.
and then the knower or the mediator between those two worlds is Frodo.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's kind of like the epitome of the hero's journey that we talked about last
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
You know, the intermediate being is the protagonist,
hmm,
meeting that wildly spiritually like crazy what's a mystical that
hmm,
mystical mentor,
yeah,
the known, the
hmm,
creator, the good, and then learning from that to fight against the destruction and mediate that in regards to the rest of the civilization, the world of that universe.
yeah.
I think that's a really good quote.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much his intro to the myth stuff.
Mhm.
Um, this one last quote here is just here's what he's going to be doing.
Mhm.
So, analysis of a series of myths. Um, let me restart. Analysis of a series of myths, the series which I would argue underlies Western civilization itself, should make these points painfully self-evident.
Mhm.
So pretty much he's made all these claims in the intro about how myths work and what they do for us and why they're important.
Yeah.
Now he's going to analyze a bunch of them um, to prove those points,
Mhm.
and not only prove them, but make it painfully self-evident that those things are true.
Yeah.
So by the time we're done with this book, that stuff should be so obvious
Yeah.
by all of the examples that are out there. And also importantly is that he thinks all of these examples that he's going to use underlie Western civilization itself. So these are the fundamental and most important myths to Western civilization.
Dang. You just popped off there.
Dude, it's so cool.
It is
And
cool.
now
It's
we're
really
getting
cool.
into we're done with the intro and he's just going to start analyzing myths.
Cool. Yeah, I what's that? What's the saying? It's not a saying, it's like a thing. Um Evil can't create, it can only destroy,
Mm,
in reference to like only the good can create good because evil could only create something bad that would be like unpleasant.
sure.
So they have to destroy what is good to
Mm,
remove anything that would deter somebody away from,
evil.
yeah,
Interesting.
to being inclined to gravitate towards
Yeah.
evil.
So we'll see. I think that a lot of these stories we can at least relate to our lives
Hmm.
now, maybe our modern world, and see
Yeah.
how it's applicable. I don't know how much he's going to try to do that, but we'll see how it goes.
Hmm.
Christian stuff will be interesting to go through.
Yeah.
We'll have more opinionated discussions probably there.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm ready. So yeah, we're gonna go
Yeah.
through Sumerian stuff, Egyptian stuff, Christian stuff,
Okay.
like Taoism and China, like yin yang kind of
Oh.
stuff.
Oh, that'll be cool. That'll be really
Yeah,
cool.
dude, we're getting into it.
Okay.
So that's all I got.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us for episode 5. I know it was kind of a, oh, I just
Oh,
killed the table. Um, what a great way to end the episode. Thanks for joining us on episode 5.
it's representative.
It is representative of the downfall of me in this series and how I understand less and less as Evan talks more and more. Um, Evan, do you have Anything at all?
I'm just excited.
Yeah,
This
I'm
should be
really
good.
excited too. I hope you like our, for those watching, I hope you liked our blue light that turned green. It's actually because it's foreshadowing the end of the episode.
Mm,
Bye.
bye.